is making their way up in behind that Metro Home Building Center starting gate for tonight's second race. 1-9 right now on the one. Speaking of Shadow, let's send it over to track announcer Vance Cameron for the race call.
Speaking of Shadow, Camelot Terror, Heather's Pet, Roses for Jenny, Checkers Pride, Elm Grove Seahorse, and MD's Girl. Top of the stretch. Here they come. Rough and pacing Heather's Pet, and speaking of Shadow, are leaving out. Third one to the turn, that's Camelot Terror to get away fourth. That's Roses for Jenny. MD's Girl is now fifth. Then it's Checkers Pride and the trailer, Elm Grove Seahorse. Up the backstretch they go, led by that 1-9 favorite, and that's speaking of Shadow. In line to Mike McGuigan. Heather's Pet is tucked away for a two-hole ride. Racing from third, that's Camelot Terror. Roses for Jenny goes fourth. MD's Girls in fifth. Checkers Pride has sixth, and the trailer seventh. That's Elm Grove Seahorse. The quarter's up in 29 and 4. They round the turn for the first time, led by the 2-year-old Arch Peak filly. That's speaking of Shadow, the fraction setter. Heather's Pet is right there in the two-hole, racing third. Camelot Terror on the move in the outside fourth. Checkers Pride underway. Roses for Jenny continues fifth with MD's Girl sixth, and trailing seventh, that is Elm Grove Seahorse, halfway home in the second. In a minute and 2 into the paddock turn, they race now towards the 5/8, and it's speaking of Shadow, the leader. Heather's Pet is second. Checkers Pride rolls up third on the outside. Camelot Terror riding the rail fourth. Roses for Jenny fifth. On the outside sixth. Elm Grove Seahorse, now the trailer. That's MD Girl, the three-quarters coming next. Speaking of Shadow leads it, but here's the challenger. Checkers Pride run alongside. Heather's Pet in the pocket third. Camelot Terror fourth. Roses for Jenny fifth. The three-quarters in 1:30 and 2/8 of a mile out. Speaking of Shadow trying to take them all the way, Heather's Pet is headed to the passing lane now. Checkers Pride on the outside third. Deep in the stretch, landing on the finish line next. On the outside, speaking of Shadow, hangs on for McGuigan. Heather's Pet was second. Camelot Terror rallied third. 1:59.2.
Well, that was a little too close for comfort for the chalk players here in race number 2. As speaking of Shadow and Mike McGuigan sent off at 1-9 from post 1. They guarded the rail. They cut it out. 29 and 4, half in a minute, 2/5, 1:30 and 2. Checkers Pride brushed up strong there up the backstretch, and they battled to the three-quarter pole. She tailed off down the lane, but sitting right on the one's back was the 3, Heather's Pet and McPherson. They made their move down the pass lane, and it was tight on the line, but I think it is the one. Speaking of Shadow digging in and holding on for that maybe a quarter-length victory here, maybe by a neck. We'll see here with that Universal Media slow-mo, but it was a close stretch drive and maybe a little too close for comfort for the backers of the one. Speaking of Shadow, but she does deliver, getting it done here in race 2. A nice mile, 1:59 and 2. Closing quarter, 29 flat.
Well, I believe it's our first look at a 2-year-old this season, and she was impressive enough. And she arrives at the winner's circle in the second. That's number 1, Speaking of Shadow. Bay Pacing Filly 2 by Artspeak. Off the Shadow Play Dam, Silver Hill Bunna. Owned by Josh McDonald of Edmonton, Alberta. Mark McDonald of Cornwall. Mike McGuigan training and driving. Filly on top at every call. In her harness racing debut, it's a winning one to a maiden record of 1:59 and 2. Speaking of Shadow, delivers in the second.